My name is Maya Sterling, and I am 22 years old. 2 weeks ago, I stood on a graduation stage in front of 3,000 people, while my parents, the same people who refused to pay for my education because I wasn't worth the investment, sat in the front row with their faces drained of all color. They had come to watch my twin brother, Ethan, graduate. They had no idea I was even there. They certainly didn't know I would be the one giving the keynote speech as the university's valedictorian. But this story doesn't begin at graduation. It begins 4 years earlier, in my parents' dining room, when my father looked me straight in the eyes and said something I will never forget. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now, let me take you back to that summer evening in 2021. The acceptance letters arrived on the same Tuesday afternoon in April. Ethan got into Sterling University, the prestigious private school my father had attended, with a price tag of $80,000 a year. I got into Oak Creek Tech, a solid public university. That evening, Dad called a family meeting in the living room. "We need to discuss finances," he said, settling into his leather armchair like a CEO addressing shareholders. My mother sat on the couch, swirling her wine glass. Ethan stood by the window, already glowing with anticipation. I sat across from Dad, still clutching my acceptance letter. "Ethan," Dad began, his voice warm and proud, "we will cover your full tuition at Sterling. Room, board, everything." Ethan grinned, high-fiving Mom. "Thanks, Dad. Sterling and Sons." Then Dad turned to me. The warmth evaporated from his face instantly. "Maya, we have decided not to fund your education." The words didn't register at first. "I'm sorry? Ethan has leadership potential." My mother chimed in. "He networks well. He is going to take over the firm one day. It is an investment that makes sense." My father paused, and what came next felt like a demolition ball swinging directly into my chest. "Let's be honest, Maya. You like to draw, but you lack structural integrity. Ethan is a skyscraper. You are decorative, like wallpaper. Throwing money at you would be like building a house on a foundation of sand. There is simply no return on investment with you." I looked at Mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Ethan. He was already texting someone, probably sharing the good news about his full ride. "So, figure it out yourself," Dad shrugged, turning away. "You're resourceful. You'll manage." That night, I didn't cry. I had cried enough over the years over missed birthdays, hand-me-down electronics, and being cropped out of family photos while Ethan stood center frame. Instead, I sat in my room and realized something that changed everything. To my parents, I wasn't their daughter. I was a bad investment. But what Dad didn't know, what nobody in this family knew, was that his decision would alter the course of my entire life. And 4 years later, he would have to face the consequences in front of thousands of people. That night, I opened my laptop, the one with the cracked screen and the dying battery that Ethan had discarded 2 years ago when he got his new MacBook. Instead, I treated my life like a failing structure that needed emergency reinforcement. I sat on my bedroom floor at 2 a.m. with a notebook and a calculator, running the numbers. Oak Creek Tech cost $25,000 a year. My parents' contribution was zero. My savings from summer internships were less than $2,300. The gap was a massive structural failure waiting to happen. I had two choices. Accept the life my parents designed for me, a life where I was decorative, dependent, and small, or draft a new design entirely. I typed full scholarships for independent students into the search bar, scrolling until my eyes burned. Most were dead ends, scams, or required financial documents my parents refused to sign. But then, buried deep in a database, I found it. The Horizon Fellowship. It was legendary. A full-ride scholarship, plus a $10,000 annual living stipend, awarded to only 20 students nationwide who showed visionary potential. I laughed out loud in the dark. 20 students in the entire country? The acceptance rate was lower than Harvard's. I looked at the screen. My father said I had no structural integrity. This was my chance to prove that my foundation was stronger than steel. I spent the rest of that summer building a schedule that would have crushed Ethan. I mapped out my life like a construction project. Job number 1. Barista at the Daily Grind near campus. Shift 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. Estimated monthly income $800. Job number 2. Weekend cleanup crew at a local construction site. It was grueling manual labor, hauling debris and sweeping dust while the foreman watched. But it paid the bills. Job number 3. Calculus tutor for the engineering department. My schedule crystallized into something brutal but precise. Wake up at 4 a.m., work, classes, study, sleep for 4 hours, and repeat. While I was calculating the cost of survival, my family was preparing for Ethan's coronation. The week before we left for college, my parents threw a send-off party for him. They bought him a brand new truck for site visits, loaded with leather seats and a premium sound system. I watched from the kitchen window as Ethan laughed with his friends, holding a beer, talking about how hard networking was going to be. He was packing designer suits and golf clubs. I was packing my drafting table and a thrift store comforter into a second-hand suitcase. When I finally drove away that August, nobody waved. My parents were too busy admiring Ethan's new truck in the driveway. But as I merged onto the highway, headed toward a tiny room in a shared house that cost $300 a month and smelled like mildew, I whispered the same thing to myself that I would whisper every night for the next 4 years. This is the price of freedom. I am breaking ground on my own life. My new home was a basement apartment with one narrow window that looked out onto a brick wall. It cost $350 a month, smelled faintly of mildew, and the heating pipes rattled like a jackhammer every time the furnace kicked on. My father would have called it uninhabitable. I called it budget compliant. The first semester at Oak Creek Tech was a blur of exhaustion. I survived on 4 hours of sleep, stale bagels from my barista shift, and pure adrenaline. While Ethan was posting stories of fraternity parties and tailgates at Sterling, I was scrubbing drywall dust out of my hair in a communal bathroom sink. But the real demolition of my past didn't happen until Thanksgiving. I couldn't afford the bus ticket home, so I stayed in my empty apartment. That afternoon, sitting alone with a cup of instant noodles and a secondhand blanket, I made the mistake of calling my mother. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. The background noise was deafening laughter, the clinking of crystal glasses, the warm, expensive sounds of a Sterling and Sons holiday. Hello? Maya? Her voice was distant, distracted. Hi, Mom. Happy Thanksgiving. Oh, yes. Happy Thanksgiving, honey. Hold on, let me move to the hallway. The noise dampened slightly. How are you? Are you eating? I'm fine, Mom. Is Dad around? Can I say hi? There was a pause. A long, heavy hesitation that told me everything. In the background, I heard his voice, muffled but clear. The words landed like stones. My mother returned to the line, her voice artificially bright. He's just in the middle of something. Ethan was telling the funniest story about his architecture professor. It's fine, really. It's fine, I lied, looking at my cold noodles. Do you need anything, Maya? She asked, the guilt creeping into her tone. Money for books? A coat? No, Mom. I have everything I need. I hung up. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification. Ethan had just posted a photo on Facebook. It was a picture of the dining table, set with the good china and silver candlesticks. The caption read, "Thankful for the dream team. Number, Sterling Legacy." I zoomed in on the table. There were 3 place settings, 3 chairs, not 4. They hadn't just uninvited me. They had erased me from the floor plan entirely. There wasn't even an empty chair where I used to sit. I stared at that photo for a long time. The ache in my chest, the desperate need for their approval didn't break me. Instead, it hardened. It was like concrete finally setting. I realized then that I was done waiting for them to invite me back into their house. It was time to build my own. That Thanksgiving night, staring at the photo of the 3 chairs, the ache inside me didn't disappear, but it changed. The pain hollowed out, leaving a space where clarity could finally settle. I stopped waiting for them to invite me back. I started pouring my own concrete. Second semester, freshman year. Structural Dynamics, 201. Professor Vance was a legend in the architecture department. He was 70 years old, had designed award-winning bridges across Europe, and was rumored not to have given an A in a decade. Students were terrified of him. I was too exhausted to be terrified. I sat in the third row, taking notes with hands calloused from my weekend construction job. For our midterm project, we had to design a load-bearing truss system for a hypothetical stadium. Most students used expensive modeling software. I couldn't afford the license, so I drew mine by hand, calculating the stress points manually until 3 a.m. When he returned the projects, mine had 2 letters in red ink at the top, a plus. Beneath the grade was a note, "See me after class." My heart dropped. I walked to his desk after the lecture hall cleared, clutching my sketchbook. Professor Vance looked at me over his spectacles, tapping my drawing. "Miss Sterling," he said, "this design, it is intuitive. You understand tension and compression in a way most professionals don't." I hesitated. "Nowhere special, sir. Just observation." "Your last name," he pressed. "Any relation to Sterling and Sons?" I looked at my scuffed work boots. The words came out before I could stop them. For the first time, I told someone the truth about the rejection, the 3 jobs, the basement apartment, the fact that my father thought I was decorative. Professor Vance listened in silence. Then, he leaned forward. "Have you heard of the Horizon Fellowship?" I nodded slowly. "I have the application saved. But it is impossible. They only take 20 students nationwide. Potential is useless if it stays on paper, Maya," he said firmly. "You have the vision. Let me help you build the structure to support it." With Vance as my mentor, the next 2 years blurred into a relentless, brutal rhythm. I woke up at 4 a.m. for the barista shift. Classes from 9 to 3. Construction cleanup until 7. Studio time until midnight. I missed every football game. I missed the parties. While Ethan was posting photos of his spring break in Cabo, I was fainting during a shift at the daily grind from dehydration. The doctor told me to rest. I was back at work the next morning. There were moments I almost broke. Once, I sat in my friend Rebecca's car. She lent it to me for a site visit and cried for 20 minutes. Not because I was sad, but because I was so tired my bones felt like glass. But I kept building. Brick by brick. Assignment by assignment. Until junior year, when Professor Vance called me into his office with news that would terrify me. Professor Vance didn't just suggest the scholarship, he nominated me. The application for the Horizon Fellowship consumed 3 months of my life. It was grueling: 10 essays, 3 portfolio reviews, and a comprehensive design proposal for sustainable urban housing. Somewhere in the middle of drafting blueprints until my eyes blurred, Ethan texted me. It was the first time I had heard from him in 6 months. "Mom is crying because you aren't coming home for Christmas again. It's kind of sad. TBH. Just come home." I read the message. Then I turned my phone face down and went back to my work. That Christmas, I sat alone in my basement apartment with a cup of instant noodles and a tiny paper tree my friend Rebecca had made me. No family, no presents, no drama. It was somehow the most peaceful holiday I'd ever had. The email arrived at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in September of my senior year. Subject: Horizon Fellowship, final round notification. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my coffee. I clicked open the message. Out of 2,000 applicants, I had been selected as one of 50 finalists. The final round was an in-person design defense at their headquarters in New York City. I did the math instantly, and my stomach turned over. The interview was this Friday, 3 days away. A last-minute flight was over $600. I checked my bank account, $84.17. Rent was due in 2 weeks. I was staring at the screen, ready to hit decline, when Rebecca knocked on my door. She took one look at my face and asked what was wrong. I showed her the email and my empty bank account. "You are going," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Beck, I can't. The bus ticket alone is $50, and I don't have a suit." "I have $50, she said, pulling crumpled bills from her waitressing tips jar. And we are going to the thrift store right now. I took the overnight bus, arriving in Manhattan at 5 a.m. with a stiff neck and a borrowed blazer that smelled faintly of mothballs. The waiting room at the Horizon Foundation was filled with candidates who looked exactly like Ethan, polished, confident, wearing tailored suits, and holding leather portfolios. Their parents were probably waiting in the lobby. I looked down at my scuffed work boots, the only shoes I owned. I felt the familiar wave of shame, the voice of my father saying I was a bad investment. But then I remembered Professor Vance's words. Potential means nothing if no one sees it. These other candidates knew how to design pretty buildings. I knew how to keep them from falling down. I stood up, smoothed my thrift store blazer, and walked through the double doors. I didn't need to belong here. I just needed to show them that I deserved to be here. 2 weeks after the interview in New York, I was walking to my morning shift at the Daily Grind when my phone buzzed. Subject: Horizon Fellowship Decision. I stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk. A cyclist swerved around me, shouting an obscenity, but I didn't hear him. The sounds of the city seemed to drop away. I opened the email. Dear Miss Sterling, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a Horizon Scholar for the class of 2025. I read it 3 times, then a fourth. My knees actually gave out, and I sat down right there on the dirty curb. I didn't cry gracefully. I sobbed ugly, heaving sobs that made strangers stare. 3 years of exhaustion, of smelling like old coffee grounds and drywall dust, of counting every penny, poured out of me. I was a Horizon Scholar, full tuition, a $10,000 annual living stipend, and the right to transfer to any partner university in their network. That night, Professor Vance called me personally. I'm proud of you, Maya, he said. But there is one more detail you need to know. The fellowship allows you to transfer to a partner school for your final year. Sterling University is on the list. Sterling, Ethan's school. My father's alma mater. If you transfer, Vance continued, his voice serious, you graduate with their top honors. And by tradition, the Horizon Scholar delivers the commencement speech. My breath caught. I would be the valedictorian? I would speak at graduation? In front of everyone, Vance confirmed. Including your parents. I thought about my parents sitting in the audience for Ethan's big day, completely unaware that the daughter they called a bad investment was standing center stage. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said quietly. I know, Vance replied. But if they happen to see you shine, that is just a bonus. I transferred in January. I told no one in my family. 3 weeks into the semester, I was tucked into a corner carrel of the Sterling Architecture Library, studying structural loads, when I heard a voice that made my stomach drop. Maya? I looked up. Ethan stood 3 feet away, holding a half-empty iced latte. His mouth was hanging open. What are you? How are you? He couldn't form a complete sentence. I closed my book calmly. Hi, Ethan. You go here? Since when? Mom and Dad didn't say anything. Mom and Dad don't know, I said. What do you mean they don't know? Tuition is 80 grand a year. How did you? I paid for it myself, I said, the words tasting sweeter than any champagne. Scholarship. Ethan's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to something that looked like shame. Why didn't you tell anyone? I looked at my twin brother, the one who had received the new car, the tuition, the praise, and who had never once asked how I was surviving in a basement apartment. Did you ever ask? He opened his mouth, then closed it. I have to get to class, I said. Don't tell Mom and Dad. I want to surprise them. In the library, the silence between us stretched tight as a suspension wire. Ethan really looked at me for the first time in years. He didn't see the sister who used to help him with his math homework. He saw a stranger who had outmaneuvered the entire family. Do you hate us? He asked, his voice quiet. The family? I looked at his hand resting on his drafting table, then up at his face. No, Ethan. You can't hate people you've stopped caring about. I pulled my arm free and walked away. I expected my phone to blow up that night. I expected my father's rage or my mother's tears. but the phone remained silent. Ethan, for reasons I still don't fully understand, maybe shock, maybe shame, or maybe because he knew my success would only highlight his own mediocrity, kept my secret. The weeks leading up to graduation passed in a strange, electric calm. Professor Vance helped me refine my speech. Rebecca drove up from the city with a dress she had found on sale. Navy blue, simple, structured like a skyscraper. "You look like a CEO," she said, zipping it up. "I feel like I'm going to throw up," I admitted. "Same thing, probably." Then it was May 17th, graduation morning. The sky was a perfect, blinding blue, the kind of weather that felt almost ironic given the storm I was about to unleash. Sterling University's stadium seated 3,000 people, and by 9 a.m. it was packed. I arrived early, slipping in through the faculty entrance. My regalia was different from the other graduates. Across my shoulders lay the gold sash of the Valedictorian. Pinned to my chest was the Horizon Medal, its bronze surface catching the morning light. I took my seat in the VIP section at the front of the stage, an area reserved for honors, students, and speakers. 20 feet away, in the general graduate section, Ethan was adjusting his cap, taking selfies with his fraternity brothers. He hadn't seen me yet, and in the front row of the audience, dead center, the best seats in the house, sat my parents. My father wore his contract-signing navy suit. My mother wore a cream-colored dress, clutching a massive bouquet of blue hydrangeas in her lap. Between them sat an empty chair, piled high with their coats and purses. It wasn't saved for me. It was never for me. My father was fiddling with his camera, adjusting the zoom lens, preparing to capture Ethan's moment. My mother was waving at someone across the aisle, glowing with pride. They looked so happy, so secure in their investment. They had no idea that the ground beneath them was about to shift. The university president approached the podium, the microphone feedback whining slightly before settling. The crowd hushed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed. "Welcome to Sterling University's class of 2025 commencement ceremony." I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. I looked at my parents one last time. Soon, I thought. Soon, you will finally see the structure you tried to tear down. The university president returned to the podium, his voice booming across the stadium. "And now, it is my great honor to introduce this year's Valedictorian and Horizon Scholar, a student who has demonstrated extraordinary vision, resilience, and architectural excellence." In the audience, my mother leaned over to whisper something to my father, completely ignoring the stage. He nodded, adjusting his camera lens, still pointing it toward the section where Ethan sat. "Please join me in welcoming," the president continued, "Maya Sterling." For one suspended moment, nothing happened. 3,000 pairs of eyes turned toward the VIP section. I walked toward the podium, my heels clicking against the stage floor, the gold sash swaying with each step. The Horizon medallion gleamed against my chest, and in the front row, I watched my parents' world collapse. My father's hand froze on his camera. My mother's bouquet of blue hydrangeas slipped sideways in her lap. First came confusion. "Who is that?" Then recognition. "Wait, is that?" Then absolute, stricken silence. Ethan's head snapped toward the stage, his jaw practically unhinged. I saw him mouth my name, Maya. I reached the podium and adjusted the microphone. A sharp screech of feedback cut through the air, followed by total silence. My parents didn't applaud. They just sat there, frozen, as if someone had pressed pause on their reality. For the first time in my life, they were looking at me, really looking, not through me. I leaned into the microphone. "Good morning, class of 2025. My voice echoed, steady as a heartbeat. 4 years ago, I was told I wasn't worth the investment. In the front row, my mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's camera hung uselessly at his side. I was told, I continued, my eyes locked on theirs, that I lacked structural integrity, that building a future on my potential was like building a house on sand. I was told to expect less from myself because the people who were supposed to believe in me expected nothing at all. The silence in the stadium was heavy, electric. So, I learned to pour my own foundation. I spoke about the 4 a.m. shifts at the coffee shop. I spoke about the basement apartment with the rattling pipes and the nights I spent calculating stress loads by hand because I couldn't afford the software. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. I didn't need to. The truth was its own demolition ball. The greatest gift I received wasn't financial support, I said, looking out at the sea of graduates. It was the rejection. Because when you are forced to build from the ground up, with no safety net, you ensure that every brick is laid with purpose. I looked down at my parents one last time. My mother was crying now, not the polite, joyful tears of a graduation ceremony, but something raw, something that looked like grief. My father sat motionless. To anyone who has ever been told they are a bad investment, I finished. Remember this. You are the architect. You always have been. I am not here because someone invested in me. I am here because I invested in myself. The applause started as a rumble and erupted into thunder. A standing ovation. As I descended the stairs, Elias Horizon, the billionaire founder of the fellowship, was waiting. He shook my hand warmly. Brilliant speech, Maya. The foundation is honored to have you. I shook his hand, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw them. My parents were pushing through the crowd, moving toward me like they were wading through deep water. They looked smaller somehow, diminished, and as my father reached me, his voice hoarse, he asked the only question he had left. Maya, why didn't you tell us? The reception area buzzed with champagne and congratulations, but the air around us was cold. Elias Horizon appeared at my elbow before I could answer my father. He shook my hand firmly, ignoring my parents entirely. Brilliant speech, Maya, he said, loud enough for the dean to hear. The foundation is proud to have you. I watched it hit them then the full weight of what they had missed. The founder of the nation's most prestigious architectural fellowship was treating their bad investment like a treasure. After Mr. Horizon moved on, I turned back to them. They looked smaller somehow, diminished. Francis, Maya, my mother whispered. Please, can we just go to dinner? Can we talk as a family? We are talking, I said, my voice calm. Really talk. Come home for the summer. Let us fix this. I shook my head. I have a job in Chicago. I start in 2 weeks. I won't be coming home. My father stepped forward, his face flushing. You are cutting us off? Just like that? I am setting boundaries, I corrected him. There is a difference. You told me I wasn't worth the investment. You were right about one thing, Dad. I wasn't worth it to you. But I was worth every sacrifice I made for myself. Ethan appeared at the edge of our circle then. He looked from our parents' stricken faces to me. He didn't offer a defense. He just nodded, looking strangely relieved. Congratulations, Maya, he said quietly. Thank you, Ethan. I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I just moved forward. 2 months later, I stood in my new apartment in Chicago. It was a studio with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline I now helped design. It was small, but I had paid the deposit with my own signing bonus. One evening, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was 3 pages long, written in my mother's looping script. Dear Maya, she wrote, I don't expect you to forgive us. She wrote about the regret, the blindness, the years of favoring Ethan because it was easy. She admitted that watching me on that stage made her realize she had been looking at a stranger who happened to be her daughter. I see you now, the letter ended. I see the architect you have become, and I am so sorry I didn't see you sooner. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't reply immediately. Not to punish her, but because for the first time in my life, the timeline was mine to control. I realized I didn't need their apology to feel solid. I had already poured my own foundation. 6 months after graduation, my phone rang. The screen said, Dad. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hello, Maya. His voice sounded different, tired, stripped of its usual corporate confidence. Thank you for picking up. I wasn't sure you would. There was a silence, heavy and awkward. Then, he said the words I never thought I would hear. I was wrong, he said. Not just about the money. Not just about the investment. I was wrong about you. I failed you as a father. I listened to him breathe on the other end of the line. I didn't offer him instant forgiveness. I didn't tell him it was okay. Because it wasn't. I hear you, I said finally. But I need you to know something. I'm not promising family dinners or pretending the last 4 years didn't happen. If you want to be in my life, we have to have real conversations. No deflecting. No pretending. That is more than I deserve, he admitted quietly. But I'll take it. It has been 2 years since that call. I am still in Chicago, working as a lead architect on a new sustainable housing project. The girl who ate instant noodles and slept 4 hours a night would hardly recognize me now, but I haven't forgotten her. I carry her resilience in every blueprint I draw. My relationship with my family is under reconstruction. Ethan and I meet for coffee once a month. It is sometimes awkward. We are learning to be siblings as adults, but he is trying. I'm sorry I never saw it, he told me recently. I was so focused on what I was getting. I never asked what you were losing. My parents came to visit me last month. It was stilted. My father spent half the time apologizing, and my mother spent the other half crying. But they came. They stepped into the studio apartment I paid for, in the city where I built a career without their help. That meant something. Last week, I wrote a check for $10,000 to the Oak Creek Tech Scholarship Fund. I made it anonymous, earmarked for female engineering students with no family support. My friend Rebecca cried when I told her. You're changing someone's life, Maya, she said. Someone changed mine, I replied. I thought about Professor Vance, about the dawn shifts at the coffee shop, and about the night I decided to stop waiting for permission to exist. And that brings me to you. If you are watching this, and something in my story resonated with you, if you have ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you weren't worth the investment, I need you to listen closely. They were wrong. I used to think love and respect were things you had to earn, that if I was smart enough or successful enough, my parents would finally see my value. But 4 years of struggle taught me the most important lesson of my life. You cannot earn what should have been given freely, and you cannot spend your life waiting for others to calculate your worth. You have to calculate it yourself. You are the architect of your own life. You don't need anyone else to pour your foundation. You don't need their approval to break ground. Your worth exists whether or not a single person acknowledges it. I am Maya Sterling. I built this life brick by brick, not out of spite, but out of necessity. And looking around at the view from here, I can finally say, I am enough. Thank you for following my journey. If this story meant something to you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Tell me in the comments. If you were in my shoes, would you have picked up the phone when my father called? I'll be reading your answers.